So first of all, I want to talk about how it is that we can identify the inner critic. Some people aren't even aware that they, are traveling around life with that inner critic. How do we tell that that critic is alive and well and talking to us?
Well, I guess if you find yourself that you cannot stop, you lack the power of intention, where you cannot stop yourself from obstructing yourself. I don't know if that makes sense, maybe as I speak. Many of us will find that we keep short-circuiting ourselves, second-guessing ourselves. We keep standing in our own way, not because we want to, but because we like to call him the critic, but I like to use the word bully. We have this inner bully in us who likes to beat us down into a corner because he tries to make us that should we try and we are wrong, we can never get it right. Should we try and we are rejected, we can never be accepted. And so he keeps us in a point that we cannot be able to survive should the outcome of our action not be as we expected or intended it to be. So this is a sign that there is the shadow, this shadow that lives and lingers around you has gained a hold of your mind and is now actually controlling you, because you can now not intentionally stop yourself from either thinking about your past mistake or moving beyond that mistake.
It's a scary thought to think that we always have that bully just accompanying us everywhere we go.
And telling you, Joey, you should have known better, you should have, you know. And yeah, it's a very scary thought. But I've come to discover that many people have learned how to discipline him. Because the mind is like a child. It must be disciplined for it to behave well. If you leave the mind to discipline itself, you don't know the kind of friends it will bring home. It will bring some of those bullies along. Yeah.
I've heard of people who tend to, or find it helpful to give this critic or this bully a name, such that when they appear, and spewing negativity, you're like, okay, Wendy.
Wendy, you call him that.
I know that's you.
I know that's you. Shut up, Wendy. Yeah. I'm trying to think here.
But perhaps you can talk about where those opinions actually come from. Do they come from other people? Do they come from the way we were raised, how we were conditioned? I mean, where do those negative thoughts actually come from?
I think the source of the inner bully, or the source of that negativity, is the need for validation. We are striving for validation, and you have to know whose validation are you trying to live up to? In whose eyes do you want to appear pleasing and perfect? And when you discover whose validation you want to live up to, then you will actually find the panacea, or the quickest way to actually neutralize this inner critic, because it is not your voice. It is how he will sound, or how that person whose validation you seek will picture or speak when this matter comes to the forefront. So it is the urge and the need for validation that breeds the atmosphere for this inner critic to thrive. So it's a validation quest that most of us live without being properly developed, so that we don't need to wait to be validated to feel valued. We actually can develop our value outside what I would say anybody's validation.
Right. And sometimes it's harder for us to take criticism from other people. When someone criticizes you and you can tell it's not coming from a good place, you're so quick to dismiss that and say, well, you don't even know me. But when it's coming from within, sometimes for some reason, why is it that we're able to take that criticism on, so wholeheartedly?
I don't think people fear criticism. I think the problem is, as you've said it, is that when they say it's not when truth is shallow, it's not when truth is dirty, that it's messy, but it is when it is shallow. I can tell you the truth, but because I don't know you, you will not, it could be the truth, but because our relationship has no depth, it doesn't make that truth to be palatable to you.
Because you are a bot on Twitter. Because you're nothing and have no face.
Yeah, I have no face. So I'm just somebody that I'm telling you the truth. So it feels as if it injures. And so we see that truth requires a degree of depth. And so when it is coming from within you, you are at a place where you can accurately define yourself. You say, I should have known better, I could have done better. So you feel like you can easily take it in because it's coming from a point of depth. So that is why it is very easy for you to self-obstruct yourself than other people, because when it is coming from outside, you can easily just develop a blocking mechanism whereby you just, like, after this program, you never go to the comment section. You just decide, I will not look at the comments. Somebody thinks this should be there or it shouldn't be there. For this is enough for a fashion watch. For somebody else thinks this should be criticized. But so for somebody, it's you saying, hey, I will not. You've just developed a way of blocking the wall. But if you don't develop the way you put effort to block the outside, you should also, what I would say, build compartments on the inside so that this particular person you're calling the critic does not come to be like a whistle in your ear for everything you want to do. There are people who actually should have actually jumped into a relationship, but they over-criticized that relationship before they got in, and eventually they never got in. Because this inner critic fears commitment. This inner critic fears challenge. This inner critic fears change. And every time he finds that there'll be required commitment here, there will be required change here, he begins to say, are you ready? You remember how the last time you committed, it didn't go the way you wanted, you're going to get hurt, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. And so you are trying to say, hey, when will this guy be, inner person here, be ready? And that's a sign.
And it might be never.
The compartment has not been built for you to deal with that.
This is all very familiar territory for me. I'm sorry if I'm, giggling here, but
we need to take you at the corner and let you have your moment.
We need to investigate this further. There are people who actually appreciate the inner critic and say, well, I do need someone to, I do need that checks and balances system of someone telling me, like, you're on the wrong path or this isn't working. And, they feel like that having that critic sort of challenges you and grows you in a way. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I believe that that voice should not just be a voice of error. It could be a voice of guidance. There's somebody, it's motivational speakers. I'm not some of the best ones, but they are motivational speakers. There's one who says that, was it Lombardi or somebody? Says like, once in a while, I like to have good advice, so I listen to myself. But it is not necessarily that the inner critic is there to sometimes oppose you, but sometimes it's there to give you an opportunity to not be blind in getting into anything. He gives you an angle that probably you may not have seen. And so the role is that he should make you desire to discern deeply or desire to develop more before you pour yourself or plunge yourself in. So I would say that voice is not necessarily a voice that we ought to strive to silence until it obstructs us. But it is also a voice that we should nurture so that it facilitates our progress in life. It facilitates how we audit relationships. It facilitates how we gauge, how we move ahead. Or else you're going to struggle with what makes life meaningful. We picked about it last week, our responsibilities and our relationships. So if you don't have this critic, you're not going to have quality relationships and you're not going to bring out quality work because you cannot even see. Have you ever had people who just don't get it right? You give them, wash this, and they washed it, but they don't have a mechanism in them to tell them, you get to see Safi, you should see it. You don't need somebody. It's like you have to speak from the outside, Onangi. Or the people who just are cold and isolated in a relationship, and you wonder, you cannot date yourself as much as you are awesome. You cannot date yourself. You have to allow yourself to be penetrated by somebody else's opinion, by somebody else's judgment, by somebody else's love. And so if this critic is not there to tell you, hey, on this one, I think even if you're right, the relationship is more. It's not about you being right. It's about the big picture. And so that is where this voice ought to be. It ought to have a guided place, a defined place, a compartment place, a compartmentalized place. But if he's allowed to just roam around, as I say,
Wander
the mind
around.
left to itself is like an undisciplined child.
Yeah.
You never know whom and what it will bring home.
Yeah, and you did bring up the point of the fact that we need to learn to coexist with this inner critic, because that's not going away. It's not something we can just offload at some point in our lives and be good. So it is very much about learning to tame it and keep it under control. So maybe we can talk about some of the different ways that we know that the inner critic is emerging. I like to think of when I feel like my energy is dropping, when I feel like I'm stuck, when I feel like there's no forward movement, then I'm like, question myself, what's going on here? What are other ways that we can notice that the
One
inner
of the
critic
ways
is
also
there?
that happens is that when you find that you struggle taking on new challenges, It is a sign that you are so much addicted to the routine of your life that when there's an opportunity to take on a new challenge, you struggle with positioning yourself in a new place. So you like want the new place to so much look like the old place so that the inner critic feels comfortable. That is also a sign that there's somebody in there. If you've watched Boondocks, this is where they say nigga got nigga in it.
Say what now?
Also, you find that there are people who, because of their inner critic, they are stubborn. They can't be led. They can't be directed. They can't be corrected. It is just a sign. This critic has formed such a defensive mode that they are ever ready to detonate on anybody who brings an opinion that they are not the best, they are not beautiful, they're not perfect. And so they struggle with just, they're the hardest people to lead when you find somebody whose inner voice is so much in charge that whenever you either, there are people who believe that a leader should dress like this, a boss should talk like this, and you should be like this. And so when you just break out of that mold, they resist everything that you do. And so that is also a sign, very difficult and very stubborn to lead and to guide. It's a sign that there is something wrong. You've been formatted wrongly on the inside. Thirdly is you have no hunger or appetite for new knowledge. It is a sign. When somebody tells you, I'm not a reader, it's not them, it's their critic. Because the only way to grow as a person is like you saying, hey, I'm not an eater, but I want to live long. Chances are, at one point, you must make an appointment to eat. Or I'm not a showerer. I don't like
I'm not a showerer.
I'm not that guy. Even if you're not, you have to intentionally put yourself there. And so when you find people who have got no hunger and quest for new learning and new information, that tells you that that critic, they have a self-teacher in them who is telling them, you already know everything. You don't need to be taught. You already have everything. You don't need to learn new things. So you'll see that they struggle. They will get books, but they will never read them. They will go to school, acquire some level of information. They will try to participate. But the objective is not for them to enhance who they are. The objective is just for them to be seen or to be known that in school. And that's why, for many of us, eventually, the inner critic, he begins maybe just when we are transitioning, because he begins to be more alive at the transition between when you're moving from a child into an adolescent and an adolescent into an adult, because that's where the inner critic begins to come in. When things like beauty, you know, when you walk to a child, all kids feel they're beautiful. They actually don't know what we fight about. And then now you begin to hear that, I am saying una forehead, I am saying una mapua. Those things you tell kids, they wonder, what's that? But now when they begin to make sense, beauty, abstract things, now, if they're not well equipped and well informed on the inside, they will not be able to deal with those abstract definitions of life. Like beauty, what's beauty? You are beautiful. I'm beautiful. No, they'll tell me I'm handsome. But who says that I have to accept?
Yeah, who defines that?
Who defines, if I say you're handsome and I'm beautiful, what makes that bad English and good English? So we always try to fit into this concrete world, but the world is not as concrete. And because of that inner critic, we struggle with new information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it appears like the inner critic is like a wounded child, kind of. Just like you need to bembeleza him and just make sure, just are we okay?
You need to discipline, not bembeleza.
It depends on your style of parenting, I guess. But, you know, you can choose to just take the mzungu way, time out, let's talk about this. or you can decide to remove the belt,
take him to the corner and tell, no, you just wake and tell him you better
style up.
Yeah.
But it seems like sometimes that critic can be stuck in the past or in the present, not wanting to move forward, like you said. So that is very much reliving disappointments. If there was any sad memories that you have, kind of holding on to those and becoming the victim and having that victim mentality constantly. Like you're saying, if, you know, for example, getting involved in a relationship and you're thinking it didn't work last time, therefore we are hurt, we are damaged, no one will love us. You know, it feels like it lives in that place of wanting to relive things. What are some of the dangers of doing that?
If not careful, you're going to drown yourself with sadness. Because, as we say, this voice is looking for validation. And the more starved this voice is of validation and has not developed a mechanism of building your own way of validating yourself, a value system or a self-concept that creates a mechanism where you validate yourself, what is going to happen is that because of that starvation, you are going to find yourself in what I call careless adventure. And you're going to find yourself either over-experimenting or over-indulging because you are trying to, you'll find a group and you'll want the love of that group so much. So sometimes they will do things you don't agree with, but because you're feeling, I want now to be seen as fun. And people say that we phlegmatics are not fun. So you want so much to be a sanguine or to be seen as a sanguine, happy guy, jumpy, bubbly guy. And some of us, we're just okay. We don't need to show teeth to show we are happy. It's a state of mind. And so you struggle with those abstract emotions like happiness, like beauty, like intelligence. These are abstract forms. Who says you're a smart person, sharp person, dignity? These are abstract things that you have to develop for yourself. And the danger is that if you don't deal with that sense, you're going to be overwhelmed. So you'll just take everything from the outside. When they say dressing like this is smart, you will just go and take that and put it on. So if they say this is beautiful, some of us, we can do, like ladies, there are people whose heads can do without hair. They can go natural. But there are some of us who should never try such magic on themselves. And when they try, they should be near a Brazilian weave or any weave because they are about to surprise even themselves. But because somebody says this is now what is in fashion, you're just going to be a person who is looking for trends because that voice has so much been overwhelmed, you've been drowned until you have lost your own voice. Because you have to learn this. This inner voice is not your true voice. He's a participant in your life, but he's not you. He's a person who you have collected the voices of the world, and now those voices of the world are now living with you. Now when you go to Rome, so that you function in Rome, this voice will try to tell you, hey, you're in Rome, remember? You're in this place, so don't do this. So it's healthy. But at the end of the day, you also have to maintain your limits and tell yourself, okay, and who is Joey? And who is Welly? And now this Welly must always be more alive than this critic to guide him, to develop him, to train him. So I would say the danger with that is that you're going to find yourself in a lot of experimentation and eventually it will be careless adventure.